The mountains did not welcome him with peace. They welcomed him with a cry. The man stepped into the clearing where his grandmother's cabin stood, roof sagging, windows blind with dust, walls breathing with the weight of years. He had come for silence, for a place where the world might finally let him breathe. But silence did not live here. From the tree line came a sound that broke the stillness. Low, fractured, desperate. A cry pressed into the earth itself. He froze. The air thickened. The wind carried it again. He followed, through grass browned by heat, through broken branches that whispered of hunters, until he saw it, a young elephant calf, half collapsed in the dirt. Steel wire wrapped cruel around its leg, tearing flesh, cutting deeper each time it tried to move. Blood streaked the dust. Flies clung to the wound. Its sides heaved with shallow breaths, eyes wide and wet, shining with fear and exhaustion. The cabin was meant to be his inheritance. Instead, this was. He dropped to his knees beside the animal, heart pounding in his throat. He pressed a hand against its trembling side. The skin was hot, quivering, alive but fading. The calf tried to pull away, but the wire bit deeper, reopening the wound, and a sharp whimper broke from its throat. The man gritted his teeth. The trap was simple in design, merciless in effect, a loop of wire anchored deep in the soil, meant to hold until death. Every second wasted drained the animal's strength further. He looked around. No one else would come. There was only him, and this cry. Above, the clouds shifted, a shadow stretching across the clearing. The man tilted his head and saw wings slicing through the sky, but the bird moved on, vanishing into distance. Silence pressed down again, heavy and demanding. The calf's eye rolled toward him, pleading without words. The inheritance of silence was broken now. He understood. If he stayed, he carried its fate. If he left, he carried its death. Before this story continues, ask yourself something. Where are you watching from right now? Because what follows will test how far trust can stretch between lives. The man pressed both hands around the wire. The metal burned cold against his skin. The calf trembled harder, every movement a knife in its own body. Blood pooled darker into the dust. Every attempt to rise made the wound worse. Every heartbeat shortened the distance to the end. The mountains listened. The man inhaled once, steady and sharp. He knew what had to begin. He worked with what little he had. The cabin's doors hung loose on their hinges, its shelves half empty, but there was cloth, water, and firewood, enough to start. He tore strips from his own shirt, dipped them in water from his canteen, and pressed them against the calf's wound. The young elephant shuddered but did not fight. The trembling slowed under his touch. Every breath came with effort, but the rise and fall of its chest carried on. The man poured more water into the earth near its mouth. Slowly, the calf dragged its trunk across the damp patch, drawing in moisture grain by grain. The sight wrenched something loose inside him. The mountains had given him no peace, but they had given him this, a life balanced at the edge of loss. Shadows stretched long as the sun slipped behind the peaks. Darkness gathered in the clearing, and the air cooled to a biting chill. He fed a small fire near the cabin's wall, enough to keep insects away, enough to hold the night at bay. That was when he felt it, eyes in the dark. At first, only the outline, a shape between the trees, then the gleam of two pale orbs, unmoving, unblinking. A wolf. The calf stirred, trunk twitching, sensing the presence too. The man's breath caught, hand reaching instinctively for the knife at his belt. But the wolf did not advance. It stood still, a shadow carved into the tree line, watching. Minutes dragged. The fire cracked softly. The calf groaned low in its throat. The man held his ground, waiting for the wolf to strike. But no strike came. The animal lingered, its eyes fixed not on the man, but on the wounded calf. There was no hunger in its stance, no rush forward, only stillness, as if it were measuring, judging, deciding. The man's hand loosened on the knife. He turned back to the calf, adjusting the bandages, whispering through his silence that it would live. It must live. Behind him, the wolf lowered its head once, then faded back into the forest, swallowed whole by shadow. The man's heart pounded long after the eyes were gone, but a thought took root, quiet and unshakable. The wolf had not been passing by. It had come to watch. The first night in the inherited cabin had given him more than memory. It had given him a companion in the dark, though whether guardian or threat, he could not yet know. Morning broke not with birdsong, but with struggle. The calf's cries echoed weakly through the clearing, each sound thinner than the last. The man rose from the hard ground where he had slept in fragments, his back stiff, his hands raw. There was no time to think of comfort, only of survival. He gathered branches from the forest edge, dragging them back one by one to form a barrier around the cabin. Not walls of strength, but walls of intent, to shield the calf from eyes that waited in silence. He tied what he could with rope and cloth, building an enclosure where the young elephant could rest without collapsing into open danger. He fetched water again and again, his canteen emptying too quickly. The path to the stream was steep, the climb harsh, and each trip left his shoulders burning, but the calf drank, and every drop that reached its mouth bought another hour of life. The wound demanded more. He stripped bark from mapane trees, ground it against stone until the fibers loosened into threads, pressing them into the blood-soaked cloths. The calf twitched under his hands, but did not resist. Its eye followed him now, not wild, not frantic, but heavy with trust it had no reason to give. Hours blurred, his palms split open, skin cracking from the strain. Blood mixed with dust, coating his fingers until they looked like clay. Still, he worked, pressing, binding, replacing. The weight of care pressed harder than the mountains themselves. From the trees came the sound of hyenas, sharp laughter cutting across the valley. The man stiffened, knife flashing in his hand. But before he could move, a shape broke from the undergrowth. The wolf. Its body moved low and deliberate, circling wide. The hyenas faltered at its presence, their laughter dissolving into silence. One snapped its jaws, another edged closer, but the wolf bared its teeth in silence, shoulders raised, a scar gleaming against its flank. The predators melted back into the brush, unwilling to test what stood before them. The wolf did not look at the man. It did not need to. It lingered at the tree line, pacing slowly, always with one eye on the calf. When the danger passed, it settled into the grass, paws stretched, chest steady. A sentinel at the border between shadow and light. The man exhaled, lowering the knife. His hands shook, but not from fear. From the weight of realization, he was not carrying this burden alone. That night, he leaned against the cabin wall, the calf breathing in uneven rhythm nearby, the wolf a silent shape at the edge of the firelight. 3 lives bound together by circumstance, none of them choosing the other, yet none turning away. But the calf's legs swelled, hot with fever. Infection crept under the bandages, a dark shadow spreading beneath the skin. The man knew, without more, without risk, the calf would not survive. The man's body broke before his will did. On the 4th day, after hours of hauling water, grinding bark and cleaning the wound, his vision dimmed. He tried to rise from beside the calf but collapsed, face pressed into the dust. Darkness claimed him in waves. He woke only to the sound of flies and the slow, rattling breath of the young elephant. His hands reached but found no strength. The world spun. When he opened his eyes again, the fire was only embers, and the clearing was not empty. The wolf stood inside the barrier of branches he had built, closer than ever before. Its paws pressed into the soil, silent, deliberate. Its breath misted in the cool air. For a moment, man and wolf locked eyes. No growl, no rush, only an unspoken line. One life had fallen, and another had chosen to hold watch. The man's gaze drifted toward the calf. There, in the dust, were marks, prints not of predators, but of a wolf circling, pacing, guarding. Abandoned bones of vultures scattered near the edge told the rest of the story. While he lay unconscious, the wolf had kept the scavengers at bay. The man's throat tightened. His body weak, he dragged himself toward the calf, checking the wound. Still bad, still swollen, but not touched by claws or beaks, protected through the night. Hours passed in fragments. He drifted between waking and sleep. Each time he surfaced, the wolf was there, closer, lying on its side just beyond reach, head lifted to scan the tree line. At one point it rose and padded near the calf, lowering its muzzle close enough that the small elephant twitched but did not flinch. The wolf's nose brushed the dust beside the wound, a gesture not of harm, but of quiet solidarity. By morning the man could stand again, unsteady, but breathing deeper. He rebuilt the fire, his hands shaking. The wolf lingered still, a shadow made flesh, eyes narrowing against the light. Something had shifted. The wolf was no longer a figure of threat. It had chosen. But the calf's fever worsened. The wound was hot to the touch, pus seeping through the bandages. The infection was spreading faster than his crude remedies could fight. The man remembered his grandmother's cabinet. He staggered into the cabin, rifling through drawers warped with age, shelves coated in dust, old jars, bundles of herbs tied with string, ash leaves, dried bark, fragments of roots wrapped in cloth, remnants of a woman who had once known the land's medicine. He carried them outside, laying them in the dirt like pieces of memory. He ground the leaves against stone, mixed them with water, added ash from the fire. The recipe his grandmother had whispered when he was still a boy, when she tended to cuts and fevers with hands both steady and worn. The wolf rose and moved closer, nose twitching at the smell of crushed bark and smoke. The man ignored the instinct to recoil. He pressed the poultice into the wound. The calf kicked weakly, groaning, but then stilled as the cool paste sank into the flesh. The man bounded again, firmer this time. His hands bled anew from the effort. The wolf watched, ears forward, body tense, not with threat, but with something else. Recognition, perhaps. When the work was done, the man sat back, chest heaving, sweat dripping into the dust. The wolf's gaze met his again. Between them lay the calf, bandaged and trembling, alive but fragile. The choice was no longer his alone. The wolf had made its own. The days had thinned into a rhythm of exhaustion. The man rose with the first light, carried water until his shoulders screamed, pressed herbs and ash into the wound, and collapsed each night by the fire. The calf fought on, but its eyes grew heavier, its ribs sharper beneath its skin. One evening, as the sky bled orange across the ridges, the man saw the swelling turn dark, veins black against the grey flesh. The infection was winning. He remembered his grandmother's voice, fragments of stories about fire cleansing, water healing, a balance. He had little left, but he had flame, ash, and the stream that trickled down the mountain's spine. That night, he prepared. He built the fire high, feeding it until sparks rushed into the night sky. He crushed more bark, mixed it with water in a clay bowl, and stirred ash into the paste. His hands trembled as he worked, blood from his cracked palms falling into the mixture, binding him to it. The wolf watched every movement, its yellow eyes glowing in the firelight. Not pacing now, not distant, seated just at the edge, like a sentinel sworn to this ritual. When the paste was ready, the man approached the calf. The young elephant shifted, trunk sweeping weakly across the ground. Its breaths came shallow, strained. He knelt, pressing the poultice into the wound. The calf groaned, body jerking, but he held steady, whispering through silence with his hands. Then came the hardest part. He took a branch from the fire, the end glowing white with heat. He pressed it close to the edges of the wound, not burning, but close enough for the heat to sear infection. The calf buckled, cried out, but the man did not stop. The smell of smoke and flesh filled the clearing. The wolf moved then. It rose, pacing quickly in a circle around them, ears pinned, chest rumbling with a low growl. Not at the man, at the world, at the pain that filled the air. The man's arms shook, but he finished, pulling the branch away, binding the calf once more with cloth and herb paste. His chest heaved, sweat poured down his back. The calf's cries softened, until only its breath remained. Silence fell, and then the calf's body stilled, not in death, but in surrender. It lay back against the earth, exhausted but alive. The man fell to his knees beside it, head bowed. His hands, blistered from fire and torn from labor, pressed into the soil. The wolf came closer, closer than ever before. It lowered its body into the dust, just at his side, not touching, but near enough that he could feel the heat of its breath. Its flank brushed the air beside him, its eyes locked on the calf, steady, unblinking. For the first time, it was not just guarding, it was sharing the weight. The night stretched on, the fire burning low. The man leaned back against the cabin wall, half awake, half broken. The calf slept in shallow rhythm, chest still rising. The wolf lay beside them both, tail curled, ears still sharp to every sound. By morning, the swelling had stopped spreading. The fever began to break. The calf stirred, trunk twitching toward the man's leg as if to say it was not ready to leave the fight. The ritual of fire and water had not cured it completely, but it had turned the tide. Now the question was no longer survival of the wound. It was survival of the body. The calf had to rise again, or all would be lost. The air was cool when dawn came, but the clearing held its breath as though waiting for a verdict. The calf stirred, trunk shifting across the dust. Its eyes opened, heavy but alive. The fever had broken, but the body remained frail, bones sharp under the stretched skin. Survival now rested not in herbs, nor in fire, but in movement. The man rose slowly, his back stiff, hands torn and wrapped in cloth darkened with his own blood. He gathered rope from the cabin, binding it into loops. Kneeling, he slipped the cords gently around the calf's body, creating harnesses not to restrain, but to lift. He braced his shoulders, pulled. The calf staggered, its front legs folding at once, the wound dragging through dust. It cried out, collapsing before it could stand. The man's arms shook, but he tried again, and again. Every fall was harder than the last. Every sound of pain cut deeper than steel. The wolf, restless, began to circle them. Its paws kicked up dust, its head low, ears flat. It was not anger but urgency, as though the animal itself demanded the fight continue. Around and around it moved, never stopping, carving a path of insistence into the clearing. The man wiped blood and sweat from his face. His chest burned with every breath. He looked into the calf's eye, not at the wound, not at the weakness, but at the flicker still burning there. He pulled once more. This time, the calf pressed its trunk into the earth, pushing, trembling, forcing weight into legs that wanted to give way. One step, then another, and another. The wolf stopped circling, planted itself ahead, tail stiff, ears high, a guide waiting at the end of the path. The calf swayed but did not fall. Its legs locked, its chest rose in a great heave. It stood. Water waited nearby in a shallow basin of rock, where rain had gathered in the night. The calf stumbled toward it, collapsing to its knees, plunging its trunk into the pool. The sound of water splashing broke the silence of days, filling the clearing with something like life itself. And then, it happened. The calf filled its trunk, turned not to itself, but to the man. It stretched out, trembling, and poured water into his open palms. The stream washed over his torn hands, cooling, cleansing, carrying away dust and dried blood. The man froze, chest heavy, unable to breathe at the weight of it. The calf gave again, a second pour, deliberate, as though offering more than water. The wolf approached, slowly, quietly, its muzzle lowered to the stream trickling from the calf's trunk, and it drank, beside the man, beside the elephant. 3 lives bound in one impossible gesture, a baptism of trust, a covenant written in water. For a moment, the mountains themselves seemed to bow, but as the man looked closer, he saw it. Scraps of wire still clinging to the wound, fragments of the trap buried deep. The fight was not finished. Not yet. The sun tilted low, spilling gold across the ridges of Ashenga. Shadows stretched long, folding the clearing into fire and dust. The calf stood at last, chest rising steady, trunk lifting to taste the air. But freedom was not complete. The man saw it, strands of wire still buried deep in the wound, cruel reminders of the trap's hold. He knelt once more, knife trembling in his blistered hands. With every careful cut, he pried the last fragments loose. The calf shifted but did not resist. It stood still, as though offering itself to the final act. At last, the steel fell away. A broken coil lay in the dirt, silent, useless. The calf raised its trunk high, a soundless trumpet of release vibrating through the mountain air. Then it stepped forward, weight no longer shackled. Each stride carried strength, each movement proof that pain had not won. The wolf lifted its head, tail brushing the ground, ears forward in quiet approval. It turned toward the ridge, watching as the horizon opened. From the valley the herd emerged, massive bodies moving like shadows against the setting sun. The matriarch paused, scanning the clearing, waiting. The calf hesitated, then began to walk, slow at first, then stronger. Before leaving, it turned back. Its trunk rose once more toward the man, a farewell written in silence. The man gathered the wire, bent it into a circle, but not a closed one, an open ring, edges broken. He held it in his palm, a symbol not of captivity, but of survival, a promise that no chain holds forever. The calf joined the herd. The line of giants moved across the plain, dust swirling behind them like memory dissolving into distance. The wolf climbed the slope of the ridge, pausing at the crest, its silhouette sharp against the dying sun. For one heartbeat, man, wolf, and elephant stood in a triangle of silence, bound together by something larger than fear, larger than survival. The fire in the cabin had long since burned out. The man stood at its doorway, hands still wet from the water the calf had poured into them. He pressed them to his chest, feeling the weight of the moment. Not a rescue, not luck, a covenant. In the quiet of the mountains, a man, a wolf, and a wounded calf turned inheritance into a covenant.